Okay, we're in Kedalat's Halach Yud Beis, starting Yud Beis. Mechaber says like this: Merkachas shenofel teichen amol. You had some kind of a jam or a jelly that into it fell bugs, ants. Overall, Yud Beis Chodesh, and then it was there for 12 months. So usually the din is that if a bug is 12 months old, the bug is mutter. It's dead and it dries out and it's mutter. But what happened is it fell into the jelly. So yesh lehistapik behem to suffer whether they're mutter. Honey has a property. It means as any sweet, thick syrup like this kind of jelly has a property of preserving things, and since it preserves it, so maybe the bug that's 12 months old didn't become mutter just because it got preserved in it. The implication being that therefore it does not become mutter after it sits there for 12 months. And the Mechaber is talking about whole bug. Shach points out so that when there's a whole bug fell into it, Mechaber uses that word, a nemolim fell into it, like whole bugs fell into it. The Shach says it wouldn't be true if partial bugs fell into it. That's going to come later, but that's and so it's true. If you had a whole bug would fall into your jelly, if you have to be 12 months old, it wouldn't be mutter. It's not such a practical case for us. I mean, it's the din, but it's not such a practical case for us. A more modern example for us of the same idea is if you had a frozen vegetable that you knew had a bug inside of it. So freezing also preserves things, just like these kind of jellies and honey would do to it. So we would say the same thing if you had frozen herbs. We could talk about herbs. If you have frozen herbs, they take the herbs, they cut them up, they put them into the freezer. If there's a bug inside of it, then the bug is preserved. So the fact that it's 12 months old is not going to make it mutter.
Doesn't freezing itself dry it out though? Doesn't the act of freezing dry things make things drier?
I don't know if it does or it doesn't, but it doesn't make it dry to the point that it has this kind of quality being 12 months old. It's not. We can't say that it goes that far. I mean, if it dries out a certain amount, makes your food not as moist, but not dried out completely.
It's all liquid. No?
But then you defrost it, you eat it. So it's not dried out. So, but I'm just before we go on, we're talking about this halach is talking about that you had you knew a bug's in there. Okay, the Mechaber is in Kashrus shenofel teichen amol. You knew that the ants fell into it. That is to say, we had before in Halacha test, we talk about what happens if you only have a suffix, if there's a bug inside of it, which is what most of our cases are. Then there might have been struggling to be more makel, nothing to do with it being 12 months old, just because of the fact that there was only a suffix, or there was a bug in there, and it was frozen. We had talked about that in Halacha test. But our Shulchan was talking about where we knew there were bugs inside of it. That's what the shayla is, not that there was a suffix, we knew there were bugs in there. The shayla is just maybe is it 12 months old, does that make it mutter? So the Mechaber is saying that the honey or the jelly would preserve it, and we would say the same thing for frozen, that the freezing would preserve it, and we would not make it mutter just because it was frozen.
Maybe rehydrate a bug that was dry.
Okay, when you dried it out,
yeah,
you removed the moisture from it, and
right,
it's completely dried out.
Right.
As opposed to if you freeze it, so you froze the moisture in there, and when you defrost it, it's back to the way it was.
That's not preserving. It's not saying
no, preserving in the sense that, no, what I mean is that
so when you
over 12 months...
It stays in the same stage. You are changing the composition of the...
Okay, let's say it the other way. It's not decomposing when it's sitting in the freezer, as opposed to when it sits for 12 months. It's whatever the effects are that it has on it, it's getting worse and worse. Okay, that's what I think. I'm not sure. That's what I think there is. Okay, so let's move on. This is the last time, if I remember, the Mechaber is going to talk about the din of 12 months. We had it a few times. It was marumas in different places. So we'll talk about a different child that there is about things that are 12 months old, which is very related to this question. Okay, there's 4 ways that people use herbs. Okay, we're going to talk about herbs because that's what I was mentioning before. 4 ways that people could use herbs. Fresh. Okay, if you go into fruits.
Definition of herb.
An herb is a little thing, grass-like thing that tastes good. Okay, like parsley, or oregano. What?
Or bag.
Well, it has a taste to it. It has a strong taste to it. It's a little leafy thing that grows in the ground that has a strong taste to it.
Is this actually an herb and a spice?
That's a good question. It's not for me. Okay, I don't know if there's probably is technically a difference. Okay, but
it says herbs and spice.
when we think of let me explain to you. I'm talking about the leafy items. Okay, because that's the one that have the bugs in it. The little grainy kind of things that look like little chunks of pieces. Those don't have as many bugs in it. Not the real shiloh. parsley and thyme and sage and rosemary, all those kind of things that are more leafy, those are buggy kinds of things also. So there's 4 ways that people use them. Use them fresh. Okay, you walk into City Fashion, you buy a head of whatever it is. And remember we even talked about once about the way the person said, take it and you bang on the table and the bugs come running out. Okay, they have bugs in them. For sure, if you get, worse ones, they have bugs in them. So that's one way people use it fresh. Or you can use it frozen. Okay, frozen is not much used on a retail level. A certain amount you could buy frozen. It's real, but it's used commercially considerably. A considerable amount of it is used commercially. If you want to make a pasta sauce, you want to put into it oregano into it, you would put in frozen oregano. It has much more of the taste than a dried oregano. That's what we'll come into in a second. So you put in frozen. You want 50-pound bags of stuff of frozen herbs.
Again, why do you freeze it?
Why don't they do it fresh? Oh, because it'll spoil.
What?
It'll spoil.
There's no mild freezing.
No, the mile is that the pasta company located in downtown Chicago can't buy that much parsley, and they can't process it. They can't deal with it. They just buy frozen. It's just a way for the practically they need to have it not fresh.
But if it would just stay well, they would just take it fresh. It's like
Sure, they would take it, but they have no way to deal with it. They can't cut off the stems and cut it up into little pieces. They just need a product that they could use. But commercially, it's very common to use frozen.
This is really common. They make little frozen.
There is such a thing for retail. There is a certain amount. It's not very common. People who use that are people who want to make dishes that have a lot of something in it. Something called pesto pasta. I forgot which one it's called. And it has loads and loads of, I forgot which herb in it. Maybe basil. Loads of it in it. So people want that. They can either chop up a lot of fresh or they can buy the frozen. Different people use it, but basically it's more used commercially. We just talked about frozen, but the frozen bug-wise is not any better off. Doesn't change because it was frozen. The 12 months is enough. Most of us use herbs that are dehydrated. Okay, that when you know it's dehydrated, sitting in your pantry in a little jar, okay, and you pour it out and it comes out as a dry flake, okay, that's a dehydrated herb. That's what we're going to talk about now. And the last thing we're going to talk about next time, Mitzvah Hashem, is freeze-dried herbs. Okay, freeze-dried herbs are, most of us are not going to have that in our pantries. They're much more expensive than regular dehydrated herbs. They're much more sophisticated. They're used in industry also because they keep a lot of the properties of the original herb better than the dehydrated ones do. We don't see that so much at home. That's, again, a more commercial item. But what we have, most of us use in our houses, are dehydrated herbs. Okay, you shake parsley into your soup, that's dehydrated parsley. Unless you're using fresh. Okay, so people use fresh at home, or people use dehydrated. But mostly, if you open up your pantry, you're looking at dehydrated herbs. Okay, so what does that mean? The common way that they do it, here in the United States, the common way to do it is, basically, you take the herbs, put them onto a tray. We're simplifying this. You stick it into an oven, come back an hour later, and you take it out, and now you have a dehydrated herb. Okay? Jesse and I saw this when we went to watch a place making paprika, which is... you were there also? Okay, we went to watch them making paprika. Paprika's not an herb, but it's the same idea. Take it, put it onto a tray, stick it into a hot area, into an oven, pull it out on the other side, and it's ready to go. Okay? It dries it out. That's what you have to do.
And it won't spoil what it is.
Well, it doesn't spoil. For the technicality of it, once you get rid of the moisture, bacteria need to have a certain moisture content to thrive. Get rid of the moisture, they don't thrive, and it'll last forever. It'll last for a long time. Okay. So, Kashrus-wise, other than the bugs, it's not much of a shiloh Kashrus-wise because these machineries is very simple, very low-tech, and it's used, a guy has it to make his herb. He grows these 5 things or these 10 things, and that's what he does it for. It's not common to do trace things on there, and they don't have much of a Kashrus shiloh, but our shiloh is the insects of it. Okay, does what we just described, does that dehydration process do anything for the insects in there? And as I start, I'm just going to tell you, a lot of what I'm going to say now, and even some of next time, is from a tshuva from a Gishincher from many, many years ago. Really a very fundamental tshuva on this whole shiloh. So a lot of what I'm going to say, you're going to hear.
What exactly is the question?
So the shiloh is, we know that if a bug sits for 12 months and it dries out, it dries out and it becomes mutter. What happens if in 12 minutes I'm able to dry it out the same way that it dried out in 12 months? I stick it in the oven, in 12 minutes, okay, an hour later it comes out of the other side of the oven and it's dried out. So is that mutter also? Did the bug, and I don't care if the herb got dried out, I care if the bug get dried out. I'm doing seemingly as much as would have happened if it sat out for 12 months. So did what I do have the same effect, and can my bug become mutter just because it went through the oven, even though it didn't sit out for 12 months? The bug was alive 3 minutes ago.
Where does the 12 months come from?
12 months is a Gemara. That if it sits for 12 months, the bug becomes mutter. So the shiloh is, that's because it dries out. So Shaila's, well, what happens if I mechanically dry it out? I don't dry it out by the sun, I dry it out mechanically. Okay, so what's the reason to think
There's
that?
something about 12 months, there's something about 12 months that's more than 6 months. I mean, it was about the 12-month, the year mark. Something.
So why is it?
What about 8 months? Is it? Should depend on the bug. Is there something specific about the year that
It's a good
you
question.
might think it's not?
I don't think that it depends. It's a year per se, because there are even some person who hold that it's 6 months after the bug dies. I don't think it's in there, but person who hold that it's 6 months because it'll die within 6 months, and then 6 months later it'll be dried out. So it's not a year per se. Okay, there's such a shita, but it's just a judgment. I don't know where the Gemara is getting it from. That after that much time, it's dried out. So the question is, can we say it's the same dried out just by doing it, sticking it into the oven? Can I get the same benefit of it? Okay. But I don't know, how does the Gemara know that it's 12 months? And like you said, why isn't it different for different bugs? That may have to do with next time. But why isn't it different for different, there's a whole range of bugs. Right? So some bugs and other bugs, you would think they would take a different amount of time. Okay, I'm not sure. But that's what the Gemara says. So now.
Are there different shittas regarding Benjamin, it seems to me? Is
Benjamin?
it 24 hours, or is it from 11 p.m. till 1 p.m. could also be?
Are you mixing
The
it?
one
Lena
Slider.
Slider. There's a Shabbat Lena Slider, but what's
You're
it?
bringing this in because 20.
There is such a shita that Lena Slider is enough. What's the connection to this?
No, I'm just saying it's like this 1 year.
It means like a full unit. You're saying that it's either maybe.
From Chav Kislev to Chav Kislev the next year?
Oh,
What does it mean?
Okay, so
Or could it mean from the end of, from Elul until Cheshvan?
Okay, so you should know. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you mean, but I didn't want to talk about this. But the Dehydration has a whole pile of shilos. What happens if it's an Ibayar? You have to wait an extra month. What happens if it's a whole bunch of shilos like this? So how do you calculate the 12 months? All kinds of pratim within calculating the 12 months. So that shilah, all those shilos on the Gear we're skipping to the end now, okay? But that child is negated, really, that there are some hashgachos. One in particular that I'm aware of that holds that the insects have to be really 12 months. So they would have to know all these details. What happens if it's an Ibiyar? We harvest it in summer. Does it go till the next summer? Do we have to wait 12 months or 13 months? And all kinds of detailed trials like that. Okay, but let's continue. The Gemara says, if you have a wine barrel, and what happens is on the side of the barrel, after you empty the barrel, or even while the barrel's in there, the skins collect on the side and forms like it leaves pieces on the side, and those dry out. So the Gemara says, if you have a grape, those skins that are there, that are left on the side, after 12 months you're allowed to eat them. Okay, we're familiar with it. For us, it's relevant to us to tartaric acid. Okay, that's a shiloh of that. That stuff that's on the side there, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. That stuff is made into tartaric acid. So Tosfos says, just like if it sits for 12 months, it becomes mutter. So too, if you stick the barrel into the oven, or you scrape the piece off and stick it into the oven, and you let it sit there for 12, and you sit there till it dries out, so it's a mutter. It's mutter when it's on the side of the barrel because it dried out. So too, if you dry it out by sticking it into the oven, just as good. Doesn't make the same thing.
It said by them 12 months also?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Gemara says bugs and these wine barrels, 12 months. And then it says, if you stick it into the oven, it does the same trick. Same thing, dry it out in the oven, gets it just as dry. So I said, that's just as much. So the Chochmas Adam, the Binas Adam, says that just like Tosfos says it about the grapes, the same thing is about bugs also. If Tosfos is like so posh with them, he says, well, just like you dry it out in the oven, it's the same as 12 months. So he says bugs is the same thing. So the Chochmas Adam says, therefore, if you dry out a bug for 12 months, it's mutter. I'm sorry. If you dry it out in an oven, it's mutter. Okay. So the Daki Tshuva over here brings a couple of people who disagree with the Chacham Adam, and many who agree with him. Okay, all kinds of names, not important names. So Rabbi Gissinger explains what's going on as follows. He says the question over here is what makes a bug mutter after it sits for 12 months. He says the Achronim who are machmir about the mechanically dried bugs all say that what makes a bug mutter after 12 months is that the bug starts to fall apart. After that much time, it falls apart, and therefore it's not a barrier. And since it's not a barrier, therefore whatever it's mixed into, it'll be mutter, because it won't be a barrier, it'll be bottle. While it was whole, it couldn't be bottle. After 12 months, the pieces start to fall off, and therefore it's not a barrier. So Ray Gissinger says the others hold, and he brings rayas from Rishonim that what happens after 12 months is not that it falls apart, not that it becomes not. I'm sorry, I'm going back up a second. They say, and therefore, by drying out for 12 months, it falls apart. But who said if you dried it in an oven that has the same effect? Drying in an oven makes it dry, but this property that it starts falling apart, and let's say legs will fall off, who said that happens to be sticking to
Who says? Take a look and see.
This is what the Achronim who argue on the Halachos say just that. What's the difference? Drying it out? The point is not to get it dry. The point is to get the pieces to fall off, the parts to fall apart. See whether it would happen or not.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a fair question. I'm not sure the answer. Rabbi Gissinger comes from a different side. Rabbi Gissinger says he says if you look in the Rishonim, but you'll see that that's not true. The Rishonim say that what happens after 12 months is not that the pieces fall apart, but that the bug gets so dry that it becomes like a piece of dirt. Comes like an eitz ba'alma. They have all different kinds of words like that to describe something becomes so beyond food that it's so dried out it's not in the food category anymore. Like we would say like it's don't say it. We say like it's not edible. We say like it's not it's not a food anymore. So he says, and therefore, if that's the point, is that it gets so dry that it's not like food, then the drying really is the point. It's not a matter of we need it to fall apart. We just need to get dried. So Rabbi Gissinger said, if these Achronim would have seen those Rishonim that he's quoting, that explain that the reason is because it gets dried out. It's like a eitz ba'alma. If you read the truth, you'll see how they're quoting some people who are quoting the real sources, and he tells you goes up the real sources, and you see what they're saying. Okay, so he's convinced, and in fact that's what's accepted, that mechanically dried insects are going to be muteros. Okay, the mechanically dried is, like the Chacham says, is just as good as the mechanically dried is just as good as 12 months old dried. So another, like I'm going to throw in that another, I don't remember from this, just does talk. Actually he talks about this, is that another reason to think that Rabbi Gissinger is right, that the reason why it's mutter is because it disintegrates, it becomes inedible. That's a better word. It's inedible is because the din of drying out is not only a din by bugs. Okay, the din of berries is only a din for bugs. But the din of drying out, the simplest, right, is what's the case that we're talking about? What's the case that the Tosfos is talking about? Is wine. Wine is not a barrier. Wine, you can't say doing the wine after 12 months it becomes not a barrier. What are you talking about? It becomes not a barrier. After 12 months, the berry doesn't apply to it. There are other cases. The Rama says if you have or hakeva, okay, you dry out a animal stomach, then you can use it to make cheese with it. Okay, well, what does that drying out have to do with berries? It's a matter of saying that at a certain point it gets so dry that it becomes not a food anymore, it becomes not an issue anymore. Or there's another case, the Shach brings in Kufidal, that Nevela can get dried out to the point that it also becomes so dried out that it becomes mutter also. So again, so it has, those alls tell us...
Any way to tell? Any way level of dryness so anyone can test to see something like that?
If what?
By parts. Is there any...
So it's interesting, when the Shaila... So if I'm going to digress for a second and answer your question. When this question we're talking about, whether mechanically dried is mutter, is the question for tartaric acid, as I mentioned. Nowadays they don't wait for them to dry it for 12 months. They take the stuff off the side of the barrel, or they take just peels and they stick it into an oven and dry it out, and they make tartaric acid. So most of the American hashgachos are makel, they have tartaric acid, even from treifon is kosher. To which Rabelsky described what Yossi's saying, which is, he said, is go to a company and tell them, let's look at dried out Weinstein, the stuff that gets stuck on the side of the barrel, see the level of moisture that it's at, and make sure that you dry out the tartaric acid to that same moisture level. Okay, in other words, nowadays, a QA person would measure that it's dried out by a moisture level. So he said, make sure that the tartaric acid is dried to that same moisture level, which it is. Okay, so that's a way of measuring. Is it as dry? So I don't know what they used to do 100 years ago, but for us, we have this thing called moisture level. We can measure this moisture. When it gets to a certain amount, then that's the same dry as that was.
Can you say that by there's two issues? There's time and then there's beria.
Okay.
And then, so if you're dealing with things with time, like tartaric acid or kavos, those are more than time. So then 12 months is good enough for that. But then for the bug, you also have beria, so they can say there's still an issue of the bug being a barrier, even if it's not an issue of time.
Wait, but if the bug is not usher anymore, why do I care if it's a barrier? A barrier is only usher if it's a barrier of isser. If it's a barrier of heter, that wouldn't be a problem. A barrier of wood, it's not a problem.
A barrier is not only an Indian of time. So
barriers,
two different issues.
You're saying it's maybe...
Up until 12 months, it's an issue of time, plus barrier, and then after 12 months, granted there's no more time because it's dry.
Do you mean to say is that maybe since it has a chashivus of being whole, even though it doesn't have taste for other Yisurim,
Right.
maybe it has a special chumrah, since it's a whole thing, it can hold on to its Isser for longer.
He's saying you
Okay.
don't.
Right, I understand. In other words, that since it's a barrier, since the barrier has an extra chashivas to it, it's harder to lose its status than another thing does. Okay, I can hear that. You could hear that. Okay, he's not saying that, but you could potentially hear that. You explain Nachron what being Machmer, who when they say that it has to be fall apart, they mean is even though it's dried out, it has to be dried out and not be buried anymore. Okay, that's possible.
Anyway, so you're saying you could test by the grape. You test by the bugs. Was there anybody attempt or?
So the problem is going to be is that in order to test this with the grapes, it's easy to test it because we take the stuff on the side of a barrel and see how long it's been 12. No. We have samples in front of us. For a bug, what we have to do is we'd have to catch some cockroaches, okay, and leave them on our shelf for 12 months. That's what you have to do. I mean, I actually have one from the Masorti. They gave me a grasshopper. So after 12 months, we have to take out the grasshopper. After 12 months, and say, okay, what's the moisture level of the grasshopper now? And then measure it against the dehydration. So I guess we could do that. Okay, you'll hear about tests next time. Other tests having to do with
The kosher grapes, how much going to dry out like that?
Okay, somehow I doubt that. Okay, so I'm going to digress now for something. Really, what we're about to talk about is really for the last halach in the Siman, at the end of the Siman Pedal. We're going to talk about it then, but we're going to talk about one part of it that has to do with now. The Chacham is a question himself. The Mechaber in the last halach says that if you have a Sheretz Saruf, you have a burnt bug, so the din is a choiler is allowed to eat that bug. Okay, and the implication is that it's only mutter for a choiler to eat it. Okay, we're going to talk about in Mitzvah Shem when we get to last halacha Yud Zayin about carmine. Whether carmine is or is not mutter, that has to do with that question. So the Ramah implies that it's only mutter for a choiler to eat it. Now, the Chacham says there are people who say that it's mutter for everybody. He doesn't accept that. He doesn't think that's correct. He thinks it's only mutter for a choiler. So his question is like this: you have a Sheretz Saruf, a burnt bug. Okay, a burnt bug is at least as dry as a mechanically dried bug. Right? We're talking about mechanically dried bug. You took the thing, put it into the oven for an hour, and it got dried out. He says Sheretz Saruf is even more dried out. It's burnt. Okay, the thing is burnt. So if it's burnt, I just told you that after mechanically drying it becomes mutter. How come the din over there says that when it's burnt, it's only mutter for a choiler? Why isn't it mutter for everybody? I just told you that mechanically dried is just as good as 12 months. So 12 months, the Gemara says it's mutter, completely mutter. So what's going on that the Sheretz Saruf is only mutter for a choiler? That's his question. He asks the question himself.
Where does it say about Sheretz Saruf?
The last halach in our Siman, halach Yud Zayin, the Ramah brings, you have a Sheretz Saruf, it's mutter for a choiler. It's again later.
Are you talking about a mouse?
What?
They didn't talk about a mouse?
Is that him talking about now?
Yeah, Sheretz.
I don't know, but let's say it is. What would be the difference?
Occasionally, when
No. But the point is, I don't know if a mouse after 12 months would be mutter, but if the Chacham is saying that mechanically dried out has the same effect. When you mechanically dry it out, you've made it mutter. So then, if you do it to a horse, also, what's the difference? Whatever it is.
There's a major difference because if you ever barbecue, you can see that if you burn something many times from the outside, it's burnt, and you dig deeper in, there's moisture and everything. There's meat over there.
Then it wouldn't be mutter for right. And then, if you're talking about that, it's so big that the inside is still edible. That wouldn't be mutter for So when we talk over there, burnt, like for real, it's like really burnt up. Yeah, and the implication, I think, is that we're talking about a little bug, not like a mouse, but maybe, I don't know. But again, it would have to be burnt all the way. So this is the Chacham's question on himself. So he says, the nafkamin is like this. In Halacha Yud Zayin, think about what's going on here. We're talking about a choila. So the choila is eating the Sheretz Saruf because he thinks that it's good for him. Obviously, for some kind of medicinal purpose. So the person there wants to eat the Sheretz. If you want to eat the Sheretz, that's achshaveh. And therefore, midrabanan we do achshaveh as if you consider it is edible. Even though for the general population it would be not edible, you're showing that it is edible. So you're not allowed to eat it. In our case, the guy's not trying to eat the bug. The guy's trying to eat his herbs. Okay, he's trying to make soup. The fact that there's a bug in there is an incidental thing. Well, actually, it doesn't apply when things are by mistake. Actually, it means that you consciously wanted to do it. You didn't want to eat the bug. You wanted to eat the herbs. The bugs are falling by mistake. So that's why over here it's mutter. Over here it's mutter to eat the bugs, and over there it's also there. The person's trying to eat it. So only the chayil is allowed to do this. It's actually it's nisur rabban. The chayil is allowed to do that. Okay, so now, before we go on, I have to just tell you that the Chacham Sadok brings a Chacham Tzvi, and Rabbi Gissinger brings others who say that there's no achshave for something that's completely burnt to the point that it's ashes. Okay? That there's no such achshave. So that's a question whether achshave applies when something is there a point that you're beyond which there's no achshave, even achshave doesn't apply. So they who say that there's no achshave when it's totally burnt to a crisp couldn't answer this question. They couldn't use this answer to the Chacham Sadok saying, and they would therefore argue on him. Okay.
But what's this for? Why there is no achshave?
The question is whether does it come a point? Is it that actually is achshave that I consider edible? Maybe that only applies to a certain level of inedible. When it gets beyond a certain point,
does it have to do then with denatured alcohol, like which person is going to drink that? That would be the same.
Maybe it's connected to that. That's possible. I'm not sure. That would probably be like in this middle category that everyone would agree to such an as achshave. The question is there a point that gets so beyond edibility that it's...
Nature is pretty beyond that. It's like the homeless or someone would drink it.
Okay, so, Fred Shlomo Kluger, he says, wait a second. Chacham Sadok said that the reason why in Halachos Yud Zayin the dried out bugs are mutter, or asur, is because you wanted to eat them. You were trying to eat it, and that's why there's actually an allowed to eat it. He says, you make a mistake over here. He says, how did the Chacham Sadok know that you're allowed that mechanically dried bugs are mutter? Where did he get that from? That came from Tosfos. Tosfos was talking about dried out wine. What's the din by the dried out wine? The Gemara says you're allowed to eat it. You can eat it, with a spoon. You can eat it. So, like we use tartaric acid. We don't use tartaric acid by mistake. We want to put it. It goes into a food. It's used as a food ingredient. So we're using because we want to use it. So the Chacham Sadok is saying is that our din of mechanically dried as mutter is only when you have it by mistake. When you're trying to eat it, when you want to eat the food, then it's not mutter, and that's Halachos Yud Zayin. He says, but your whole makar is from a case where it says you're allowed to eat it if you want to eat it. So you're telling me that mechanically dried is mutter. So the Rosh Hashanah says it's a raya that mechanically dried is not mutter. The difference in our case and Halachos Yud Zayin is that Halachos Yud Zayin it was dried up by a fire. That doesn't count. 12 months old it becomes mutter. Drying something out with a fire does not make it mutter. Okay, drying something out with a fire does not do the trick, and that's why in Halachos Yud Zayin it's also Sheretz Saruf because someone dried it out mechanically. He says, so you're saying to me the chiluk is whether you wanted to or you didn't want to eat it. The whole case that you bought your rye from is a case where you wanted to eat it. So what kind of thing is it? So, it's a good question. But presumably, the Chacham doesn't talk about this. Presumably his answer would be he would say I told you when Tosfos says that dried out with a fire is mutter, Tosfos doesn't bring rayas and prove, he doesn't talk about it to him, it's like pashut, it's like obvious that when the Gemara said dried, fire is just as good. The way Tosfos makes it, it's as if when the Gemara said 12 months old was just one example. It was pashut that being dried out is just, by a fire is just as good. It wasn't it was just like an obvious thing. If that's true, then the Chacham, he's not bringing a raya really from that case. He's just saying that it's just a pashtus that after being 12 months old, that after being dried out is the same as if it's 12 months old. I'm not clear how he's going to answer the question. Why taka I'm not sure he's going to answer the question, but why taka isn't the... Oh, okay. I take that back. I have a possibility. He could possibly answer the question and say that the reason why the grapes are mutter to eat l'chatchila is a special kula in Hilchos Tanyayin. It's a special kula in Hilchos Tanyayin, which is, I'm going to give you an example now. You know that when wine is diluted into 6 times, it becomes not wine anymore, and the Isser of Tanyayin falls off. But then what does that tell us? Something that tells us that Tanyayin has special kulas when it's not wine anymore, all these soon fall off. So maybe the reason why in the Gemara you're allowed to eat the wine, the pieces from the wine barrel, is not because when it's burnt there's no achshave. It's because wine has a special rule to it. Once it becomes that burnt, it's not wine anymore. So what were you achshave? You showed that you consider it a food. Okay, I consider it a food, but it's not a food that's also the whole isser fell off of it. As opposed to the bug is only mutter because it's not edible. That's what made it mutter because it's not edible. If I show that I consider it edible, then it is a food. Okay, so the Chacham Sadok would just be seen from Tosfos. That case, it happens to be it's mutter even to eat l'chatchila. Our case is not, but we're just trying to bring the idea, just like Tosfos says that it's pashut that fire dried out is the same as dried out by air, just sitting for 12 months. So he wants to bring that point from it. The case over there, where Toysa said it, is the case where it's mutal chatchila, but for a side reason. It's mutal chatchila because the whole issue is completely removed once it gets to a certain point. Okay, so we're going to stop here. We have still to do. I didn't fully tell you the truth about something before. I didn't. Yeah. So we're going to have to get back to one part of this thing that we talked about. One of the very practical applications of this. Very serious questions about that next time. And in Mitzvah to talk about freeze dried. Okay, that's the other part of it. That's really the more chiddushik part of what Rabbi Gissinger said is about whether freeze dried herbs, what the din is of the bugs for freeze dried herbs. It's Mitzvah next time.